Good afternoon. My name is Sergeant Alexander Martinez. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Torrance Police Department. Thank you for coming today. We're holding this press conference to inform the public that a suspect in the 46-year-old murder of Terry Lynn Hollis has been identified. Here today we have Captain Miller representing the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, Dr. Othon Mena representing the Ventura County Medical Examiner's Office, Senior Criminalist John Bockrath representing the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Crime Lab, C.C. Moore representing Parabon Nanolabs, Allison Nunez representing DNA Labs International, and the Torrance Police Department command staff. Also present today is Terry's family, who will be speaking with the media at the conclusion of the press conference. At this time, I will present the Torrance Chief of Police.
Good morning. My name is Eva Ravine, and I'm the Torrance Police Chief. Terry Lynn Hollis tragically lost her life in a senseless crime back in 1972. I want to first offer my condolences to the family for their loss. This crime is what nightmares are made of, and no family should ever have to go through such a tragedy. On November 23rd, 1972, which happened to be Thanksgiving Day, 11-year-old Terry Lynn Hollis left her home in Torrance to go for a bike ride, and she never returned home. When Terry did not return home, the Torrance Police Department immediately set up a command post, searched day and night in an effort to locate her. The following morning, Torrance Police Department received the devastating news that Terry's body was located on the rocks adjacent to the Pacific Ocean near Point Mugu in Ventura County. The Ventura County Sheriff's Department, along with the Ventura County Medical Examiner's Office, handled the preliminary investigation. They processed the scene, they conducted an autopsy, and determined that Terry had been strangled and sexually assaulted. The evidence collected by Ventura Medical Examiner's Office was later retained by the Torrance Police Department for further investigation. The Torrance Police Department detectives worked on the case for several years. They conducted over 2,000 interviews and investigated numerous leads that did not lead to the suspect we have identified. The sexual assault evidence that was collected by the Ventura County Medical Examiner's Office was submitted to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Crime Lab for screening and DNA examination in 2000. Biological evidence recovered from Hollis was processed and entered into the Combined DNA Index System, which is more commonly referred to as CODIS, with no hits. Familial DNA, also searched by the California Department of Justice, twice also came up with no hits. In 2015, the Torrance Police Department was made aware of new innovations in science and technology and enlisted the services of Parabon Nanolabs, a DNA technology company in Virginia that specializes in advanced DNA analysis services. One of the services used in this case was DNA phenotyping, the process of predicting physical appearance and ancestry from an unidentified DNA. And it was also recovered from the DNA from Terry Lynn. Using DNA evidence from this investigation, Parabon produced trait predictions for the associated person of interest. Individual predictions were made for the subject's ancestry: eye color, hair color, skin color, freckling, and face shape. By combining these attributes of appearance, a snapshot composite was produced depicting what the person of interest would look like in hopes of generating a lead. Detectives utilized the composite to assist them in the investigation, but a suspect was still not identified. In 2018, a genetic genealogy analysis was completed by Parabon using only publicly available databases. Parabon received a hit to a possible relative and provided the lead to our detectives. Detectives then used traditional investigative methods to confirm the information provided and discovered that the potential person of interest at this time was Jake Edward Brown, who was deceased and was buried in Arizona. Detectives traveled to Arizona, exhumed the body of Brown, and collected bone remains to obtain possible DNA for comparison. The bones were submitted to the Los Angeles County Crime Lab for DNA extraction analysis, but after 2 attempts, they were actually unsuccessful in obtaining usable DNA from the remains. Not allowing this to hinder our investigation, Bockrath and detectives sought out the assistance of DNA Labs International, which is out of Florida. DNA Labs International was successful in extracting DNA evidence from the bones collected by the detectives, and they were able to confirm that the bone remains of Jake Edward Brown were a 1 in 20 septillion match to the evidence collected from Terry Lynn Hollis. For the past almost 47 years, the Torrance Police Department has continued to work on this case and has been determined to try to bring closure or resolution, because you'll never receive closure, to our family, to their family, and to the community. In late 2019, the Torrance Police Department detectives were successful in identifying Jake Edward Brown, also known as Thomas Tracy Burham, as a suspect in this case. Records indicate Brown passed away in Arizona in 2003. Brown had prior arrests for narcotics, robbery, and 2 rapes that occurred after the murder of Terry Lynn. The first rape occurred in 1973, and the second in 1974. Under these very unfortunate circumstances, we are still proud to say that this case has been solved. But detectives will continue to investigate to see if the suspect was involved in any other unsolved crimes. We'd like to thank the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, the Ventura County Medical Examiner's Office for their outstanding work in collecting the valuable evidence that would eventually lead to the suspect's identification 46 years later. When the evidence was obtained, which was the sexual assault kit, technology had not caught up to the evidence that had been preserved for 46 years. We'd like to thank the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, their lab, and the senior criminalist, John Bockrath. John was contracted by the Torrance Police Department in 2004 to provide services and assistance with all DNA-related investigations. John was instrumental in processing the DNA, introducing detectives to the various companies that helped in this case, and was the liaison for our detectives. We'd like to thank Parabon Nanolabs, DNA Labs International, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office in Arizona, who assisted us when we exhumed the body, the Torrance Police Foundation for their continued support in providing funding for the analysis completed by DNA Labs International. And a special thank you to every single person that assisted in the evolution of this investigation throughout the years. This was ultimately made possible due to the outstanding efforts by everyone who was involved in the case from 1972 through the identification of the suspect in 2019. This was the ultimate team effort conducted over almost 5 decades. Before I do entertain any questions, I would like to invite up Terry Lynn's brother, Randy, who would like to make a statement. And if you can't, I will help you. You're welcome. You want to introduce yourself?
I'm Cherry Lynn's brother, Randy Hollis. I was 16 at the time that she was taken. And I just have a few brief. I'm not a public speaker, so I'm going to try to get through this. But when you think about it, 47 years, I mean, it's amazing that we've come to this day. I only wish that my parents were still alive to see this. Obviously, a lot was taken from us that day. And throughout my life, and I imagine Tammy's, Thanksgiving Day, I always allow for a private moment to remember Terry. We would like to thank the Torrance Police Department for their efforts towards finding this person. This was a case that detectives would just not let get archived or let it go. And they continued to follow up leads through all the years. And in some you know, every once in a while they would come by and let me know where the case was, and who, if it was being passed on somewhere else. And I thank all the detectives that worked on it, everyone, and the ones that picked it up. You know, some of these detectives weren't even born when this happened, but they all took it personally, and they worked it as if it was a new case. So I appreciate that, and I know Tammy does. The only thing is what we'd say to the many other parents and relatives, and to the associated police departments in those cases. The unresolved cases of young children gone missing or found dead without resolution. Don't lose the heart or the drive to get resolution. You just never know when something that can come up and lead to a case being solved. And we will forever be grateful to the Torrance Police Department. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you for that. I'm now available to answer a few questions. Please be advised that due to privacy rights, we may not be able to answer all the questions that you have. And also, I may be handing off to various people that are behind me who are the experts, because this is a very technical case. Yes, sir?
Can you put into some context the use of DNA, how that was all able to make this come together?
So the question is, can we put into the understanding of how DNA was so useful in this case? And for that, I'm going to hand it off to John Bockrath.
The DNA that was collected by the Ventura County Medical Examiner's Office was examined in the early 2000s. It went through the standard DNA technology at the time using STR protocols, and a suspect profile, DNA profile, was entered into CODIS. It produced no hits in all the years that it's been there. As a result, as technology changed, in 2015, we were made aware of a new technology that could do phenotyping. It was not a protocol that we use in the general forensic community and law enforcement, so Nanolabs was contracted to provide that testing, and 3 years later, when genetic genealogy came on board, they were able to utilize the same data from 2015 to then move on to the Ancestry work.
More questions?
So did you get how did you get the DNA that led you to ultimately the match?
The DNA came from the medical examiner's office in Ventura County in 1972. It was collected at autopsy. It was taken by the Torrance Police Department and then submitted to the crime lab in the early 2000s for DNA testing. Prior to that, there wouldn't have been any testing available to utilize that particular evidence since there was no suspect to compare it to.
Is that standard for them to say to keep it that long?
Yes.
So was Brown's family, did they submit the DNA? Is that how ultimately you found him?
There was a relative. And it was,
Explain that process a little bit.
Want to see some more?
yes.
I'm going to pass it on to Cece Moore from Parabon Nanolabs to talk about the genetic ancestry.
Hello. The DNA from the crime scene was analyzed in a much more advanced way than has been traditionally used for forensics. So instead of looking at 20 genetic markers, we're looking at hundreds of thousands of genetic markers across the genome. That allows us to find more distant relatives. So we're not just looking for an immediate family member. We can use second, third, fourth cousins and beyond. So we upload that DNA file to a public database called GEDmatch. There's about 1 million genealogists who have uploaded voluntarily their files there. So this file was compared to those 1 million or so files, and then we get a list of relatives. We're hoping somebody or somebodies, oftentimes it's many matches, are close enough related that we can build their family trees and then come forward in time looking for the suspect. And so that's the basic idea of genetic genealogy.
The genealogists that upload the information, does this come from places like Ancestry.com? How do you get those? Which
Yes.
companies would be involved?
So law enforcement is not using Ancestry DNA's database or 23andMe or MyHeritage. However, people who take a test there can then download their raw data file and upload it to GEDmatch voluntarily. So we encourage everyone who's interested in assisting law enforcement resolving these cold cases to do so. There's about 30 million people that have participated in consumer genomics, and there's only about 1 million in GEDmatch. So there's a lot of potential for more people to upload and get more of these cases resolved and bring answers to families like Terry's.
Was anybody in contact with the relative that you contacted? Can you talk at all about your interaction with them and their response to this?
So we have contacted the relative of Mr. Brown, but that's one of those questions that I am not going to answer in regard to privacy rights.
So he had an alias, or did he explain that as a name?
He had two names. He had an alias. If you'll see that there's a booking photo, there's a picture of Terry Lynn, and then there's a booking photo. And most likely what occurred in one of his arrests, he listed a different name, and we identified him to his birth name.
Did that complicate figuring out this?
No, no. Did it complicate it, that he had two names? No, it did not. Many, many people have aliases. Many, many people have multiple names. Every time somebody gets married, they have a different name.
Can you elaborate on his criminal record, please?
Can I elaborate on his criminal record is the question. Yes. He had prior arrests for narcotics, robbery, and two rape arrests that occurred after the murder of Terry Lynn. The first rape arrest was in April of 1973, and the second was in April of 1974, so a year later, and 2 years after, almost 2 years after Terry Lynn was murdered.
Where did those occur?
At this time, we're not going to release that information because we are still doing follow-up investigation to try to resolve those crimes as well.
Can you say whether these were local cases or out-of-state cases?
Actually, I don't have that information.
Did he serve?
Hold on. I'm sorry.
Did he serve jail time?
Yes. Do you want to answer that? Or no? He served jail time.
Were those two victims notified?
At this time, well, he wasn't arrested. He wasn't connected to them at this time. We knew that they were arrested, so at the time, I'm sure that when he was arrested, those victims were apprised of the arrest at the time.
I should be raised. Were those victims notified that he was identified for this crime?
The question is, were the victims of the two rapes after Terry Lynn's rape and murder, were they notified of his connection to this case and his being deceased? I do not know that at this time. And I'm sure that's all going to be part of a follow-up investigation that will occur. Again, remember, we're still following up on many other leads now that we've identified Mr. Brown as being responsible for the murder of Terry Lynn.
Did he die in prison, or do you know anything about the circumstances of his death?
The question is, how did Mr. Brown die? And he died of medical conditions.
In prison, or was he free at the time?
He was not in custody at the time. Thank you.
Chief, does your department have a contract with Parabon, or is this as needed?
We did enter into a contract with Parabon during this case.
And so going forward, do you have them like on a retainer then?
We absolutely do now. It's not on a retainer, but we will absolutely utilize their services should the need arise for any future cases that we have.
Is it expensive?
I don't know if we should get into that. I mean, it's certainly, it's not cheap. The question was the cost, and I'd prefer to keep that because that is a contract, and that's something probably we shouldn't put out there.
It's probably a matter of public record, honestly.
It could be, absolutely. So It's not cheap. And the truth of the matter is that it is worth every single penny that it cost to solve this crime.
Is Brown from Southern California, or can you tell us anything more about what he would have been doing in Torrance at the time of the disappearance?
So the question is, why was Mr. Brown in the city of Torrance? And that we don't know. We do know that he has multiple addresses in many different places, many different states. Whether he was a drifter, whether he was just driving through, we don't know that at this time. And clearly, because Mr. Brown is deceased, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to find out why he happened to be in Torrance at that specific time on Thanksgiving Day. Great. Okay, so hold on one second. I know that the family will meet with the media to ask any questions, or to answer any questions, and you want to close it out?
So this will conclude the formal press conference. Representatives from the various companies that I introduced earlier and the family will stick around if you guys have any specific questions you want to meet with them and ask questions. Okay?
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much.